Good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot for joining us today in this seminar and interdisciplinary webinar on heritage, memory, and identity, community participation in eco-museums. And this seminar is hosted by the Architecture and Urbanism Research Group at the University of Leeds. My name is Dr. Jihan Salim, and I am an architect and associate professor at the University of Leeds, and I'm the founder of the Architecture and Urbanism Research Group in the university. And I'm also extremely delighted to welcome all speakers and our guests joining us today, as we have more than 100 participants who have already registered to attend and participate in this webinar. I would also like to welcome our two keynote speakers, Professor Pan from China and Dr. Massing from the UK, and to thank them both for accepting our invitation to enrich the seminar during both sessions today. So thank you so much for joining us. So why are we gathering today, and what's the purpose of the seminar? I would just like to highlight some issues about this today and to give some background. So today we're hosting this interdisciplinary seminar to interrogate the connection between tangible and intangible heritage and community memory. And we're trying to explore the role of eco-museums in community participation associated with tangible and intangible cultural heritage. As we all probably agree that heritage is the bridge that connects the past, present, and the future. And during the past century and past years, we have witnessed numerous risks and dangers threatening heritage around the world, with the most obvious of those to be armed conflict and war, looting, earthquakes, uncontrolled urbanization, deterioration, neglect, and pollution, and the list is long. In addition to that, intangible cultural heritage such as traditional skills, festivals, performances, and so on are also facing risk and potential losses under a variety of circumstances. Intangible heritage is usually separated from the original cultural environment, and mostly due to the great changes in lifestyle caused by urbanization, or it has been subject to over-industrialization and commercialization in order to expand regional economy in many cities and many countries. Luckily, as more researchers and professionals direct their efforts towards heritage conservation, new ideologies, concepts, and novel technologies have emerged to reduce some of the risks mentioned above. At this stage, we try to focus our discussions today to interrogate the idea of eco-museums, which is also one of those concepts that globally emerged in the past decades, and which provides also various themes and models to protect both cultural heritage and natural heritage. Some of them aim to preserve cultural resources such as traditions and identity. For example, the Skansen Museum near Stockholm, who has been established to protect the identity of the local community. Some eco-museums as well in Denmark, Netherlands, aim to preserve traditions and the countryside lifestyle, and the Ecomuseum in Portugal aim to protect handcrafts. In addition, countries with special natural environments, such as Iran, for example, established a desert ecomuseum in order to develop sustainable desert tourism. In the UK, open-air museums attempt to preserve industrial archaeology, traditional rural areas, and the evolution of urbanization. So what is common in all this is that memory of the past significantly contributes to the existence of eco-museums to demonstrate the changes and the transformation in human life. Hence, we aim today in this seminar to bring together scholars, early career researchers from different disciplines, as well as practitioners to share their ideas on the role of eco-museums in connecting community and heritage, as well as the challenge on community participation in heritage projects. Before I move on to the structure and the program of the day, I would just like to give a quick brief about the group, the research group, and what we do in that. Within that context of inquiry, in the Architecture and Urbanism group at the University of Leeds, we are particularly interested in using methodologies drawn from both humanities and design to unfold complex topics on memory, identity, and place. And also this includes cultural heritage protection, authenticity, utilizing digital and virtual heritage technologies, working closely with museums and public engagement in post-conflict cities, and also using a variety of interdisciplinary tools, methods, and innovative practices. We do approach design as a comprehensive process that take account of the influence and impact of human actors, either if they are individuals or groups or communities. And therefore, architecture and urban heritage are essential domains through which the intellectual debate, negotiation, dialogue between the wide spectrum of theoretical, social, cultural, political, practical, and technological concern would help us to inform a better future of more sustainable and human cities in the built environment. Also, our key interest in that is to conduct interdisciplinary and impact-oriented research to address global and local challenges. And to achieve this, we adopt methodologies and solutions focused on, driven by the needs of societies to make social and economic impact and make differences in people's lives. We are looking at unlimited challenges that are threatening identity, place, art, performance, conflict, memory, cultural heritage, and more. And given the nature of the sphere of interest, we are dedicated to an integrated approach to academic research and design creativity. And we are closely working with new collaborators and networks, investigating possible funding opportunities, working closely with stakeholders, and promoting a wide dissemination spectrum through publications, exhibitions, organizing conferences, workshops, and seminars like the one that we are holding now, with a strong web-based presence. Hence, just to conclude about that, the seminar today is one of our first steps to launch this type of research and to offer a gathering space for researchers focusing on issues of cultural heritage and its comparative urbanism across the globe. I'm also particularly delighted that our speakers today come from a wide range of disciplines and backgrounds. So some are architects, artists, anthropologists, museum and heritage experts, poets and writers, and more. So I hope that speakers and participants will benefit from this range of experience to outline new methodologies and vocabularies for conducting future-oriented research. So moving to the program and structure of the seminar today, we will be running 2 sessions. The first panel will start shortly with our first keynote speaker, Professor Pan, who will deliver a talk on eco-museum practices in China, along with 4 speakers who will share some cases around the world in preserving communities' memory, identity, and traditions. In the second panel, Dr. Meng will be giving a talk on community-led heritage project in the UK, with 2 speakers focusing on Ecomuseums' connections with community and heritage. We also have 3 presenters in the panel who will discuss ideas of community and identity. So, to save time and for some housekeeping, if you all allow that, we will be receiving questions at the end of each panel. And please feel free to use the chat box on the side of the Zoom screen to type any questions you wish, or if you wish to do that verbally, please raise your hand and we will be taking questions at each panel. So we have like 20 or 30 minutes for Q&A at each session. Also, just for housekeeping as well, please can you keep your mics muted? And as I said, use the chat box or raise your hand if you have any questions or any comments. So at the end of this brief introduction, I would like to thank Ms. Meng, Queenie, who has done all the effort for organizing this seminar and webinar today, and she has done tremendous effort, and she's the person behind the scene who has been organizing all this. So thank you very much, Queenie. Queenie is a PhD researcher in the Architecture and Urbanism Research Group at the University of Leeds, and her work is more concerned about eco-museums in China. She will be talking about that later in session 2. So off to you, Queenie, to introduce our first keynote speaker, and thank you very much, everyone, once again.
My title is Ecomuseum Practice, the planning and the building of ecomuseums in Anji County, Zhejiang Province, China. Before I move to Anji Ecomuseum case, I would like to share with you the ecomuseum practice in China, very briefly review on the outside of Anji County. Ecomuseum was borrowed from North Europe, especially Norwegian. So we just learn from Norwegian the practice. So we work with the Norwegian professional on the ecomuseum. So we take their the theory and the practice, not like the French model. We just learn from the Norwegian model. So they focus on traditional culture, focus on the preserving living heritage in the local community, and also they focus on the community construction, but they not focusing on the tourism, not focusing on the economic. So they only focus on the ecological issue, not focusing on the economic. So from if we talk about the heritage and economics, we think we need to pay more attention to the heritage. So the heritage is can make the past connection between the past and the future. But for the local government, for the local villages, they pay more attention to the economics. They say, this is a heritage program can make our community developed, or can make our life better. So this is the graphic representation of the ecomuseum is made by river. So we can very clearly know this presentation of ecomuseum not focused on economics, nothing with economics. So I think the boundary of territory of the ecomuseum, it's not a building, not a collection, not a professional consists of this the same boundary with the community boundaries, but the community people pay more attention on economics and development. So the first step of China, we just borrow the ecomuseum program started from 1987. The first one is the Soga Museum. So it's jointly built together with the Norwegian professionals. So it's the Meng, very small village community called the Meng people. In China, we call the Miao people. Just because they have very special the hair decoration, so they use called the long haul hair decoration Miao. But if we judge by the language, we know this is called the Qingmiao. It's a very small language tone of the Miao language system. From the first step economic in Guizhou, work with Norwegian people. We built 4 ecomuseums in the 1980s. Here is the map. We can focus on one is the Meng, the Miao, another is the Buyi, the third one is the Dong, the fourth one is the Han Chinese. The Han Chinese was selected in Guizhou is it's very special, just because they think the Han Chinese they live in the past. It means almost 600 years ago lifestyle. So they choose this settlement as the first step economic ecomuseums. Here's the 4 ecomuseums in Guizhou. This one is the Meng. Here is the Buyi. Here is the Dong. The Dong very good at construction. So very few people you can build a very high the building. They're very good at the bridge. So the Dong people always choose we call the very good environment to settle down. The people who involved in that program think, we need to find a new way to build the eco-museum, not only work with the government. We should work with the local villages. So after that, for eco-museum program, the one professional, Mr. Hu, worked with a culture foundation, which is from the Hong Kong, to build a very new eco-museum called Dimen, Guizhou. Also, the Dong, the people. The far here is the village settlement. Here is called the information center, and the library, a theater, or the exhibition hall, just a little, half mile away from the old villages. They built a library and information center for the museum, also for the local communities. Also, this museum and this information center also is the theater, also the culture center of the village, because the Dong people is very good at chorus called the grandson. The grandson is what was put on the World Intangible Heritage List. The local people call the Dong grandson Donggala, Donggala. They say the rice can nourish your body, but the sun can nourish your soul. So the Dong people is very they pay much more attention on their sons. So this culture foundation built a local community called their own museum called the Dimen. The second step is the Guangxi Eco-Museum practice called 1+10 Eco-Museums started from 2003 to 2009. Called the one is the provisional ethnology museum. The 10 is ethnic minority community eco-museums. So here's the four. I'm very lucky to be involved with the 9 of the eco-museums in Guangxi. Here the map, the 10 eco-museums spread on the Guangxi autonomous region. As China we call the Zhuang autonomous region. Actually, this is the provincial one. After Guangxi and Guizhou eco-museum practice, we summarized how and why China built eco-museum. So we conducted what we call the 6 economic principles in 2005. This is interesting. Because the first eco-museum in China is Soga, but we don't use the Soga principle. We use the 6 Liuzhi is the district of so the Soga belongs to the 6 district. Just because the conference at 6 because Soga has no any hotel at Soga, so they don't use the Soga as principles. So from 1987 to 2008, before Olympic Beijing, there are 11 economics in China, eco-museum in China. So very quickly review how the process of eco-museum in China. So Anji Eco-Museum practice, Anji is about 2 hours drive from Shanghai and 1 hour drive from Hangzhou. So the Anji area was taken as we call the backyard or the garden of Shanghai and Hangzhou. So from 2008, Anji County started to build eco-museum. So I was lucky to be involved to work with the local government and the local community to build the Anji County Museum. What kind of museum the local people and the local government wanted to build, and how to build, and how many museums, and those is a very pretty new program for the Anji. So here, here the building is the county museum. From the first step, the local government and the director of this museum just want to build a new building of them. They don't want to build the Ecomuseum. So when they started the construction of the Anji Museum, they find the called the firm or the university to work together with the county government. So relying this is a very important thing I need mention here. Relying on the overall environment for the construction, which called the Beautiful Village Project, is supported by the Zhejiang province. So the relying on this Beautiful Village Project, the Anji County started its planning of building economic museum. First, from the first the document, you can know they use the ecological museum and not use the Ecomuseum. So mine have a little difference between the ideas, and they say, oh, they want what the Beautiful Village projects. So we showed really very close related with the ecological museum. Not they think the ecological is a kind of environmental things issue, is not the culture issue. But when they go review of the Ecomuseum theory or the practice in Guizhou and Guangxi, they know what we do actually is the Ecomuseum. So they changed the title from Ecological Museum to the Ecomuseum. So far, it's since 2008, the whole country was put on the construction plan of Anji Ecomuseum. Actually, they call the one center the four focus on the four heritage types. One is the natural ecological, we call all the natural resources. The second one is historical civilization, we call the historical culture. The third one is the folklore, or the we call the folk culture. The third one called the traditional industrial ecology. So we plan to build the 12 exhibition area. Then we change the exhibition area to the thematic Ecomuseum, and the third level we call the multi-exhibition site. We change the multi-exhibition site to exhibition. We call the exhibition hall, or the exhibition house. So, now there are more than 40 Ecomuseums was conducted and opened to the public in this country. Here's the map. So okay, from the different color, you can know this is the county museum, or called the information center, or the museum, or the index museum in the township. A second level we call the thematic museums. The third one called the exhibition site or exhibition houses. The general planning for construction of Anji economic Ecomuseums was jointly completed by the Anji County government, Zhejiang University, and the Minzu University of China. There was 3 revisions of it. The general idea of planning was to evaluate natural and culture resources county-wide comprehensively by combining planning documents like the overall planning of urban and rural construction. On that basis, relying on the opportunity of building a new museum for the NG County Museum, the exhibition hall, the exhibition spots of each town or the village of NG County in what called the beautiful village construction could be included as many as possible. So that's a culture and ecological or the traditional economical museum cluster with brand effects can be planned and built. According to the general planning, Minzu University of China formulated the implementation planning for the construction of NG Ecomuseum, combined with the reality of the practice as well as the general national requirement for the demonstration projects of ecological museum or the community museum, which supported by the state administration of health heritage. So designed the construction process and detailed implementation rules for it. So we are lucky. So we just from the beginning to this national implementation project to work with the local government and the local people. So here is the village community museum. Actually now more than 26. They not use exhibition site or exhibition hall. They use small museums. Here is the Shouyong. Shouyong, is a town museum. Also, it's a white tea museums and a tea garden. Here is the first one open to the public. So the Shouyong people want to focus on they actually it's called white tea. Actually, it's the green tea. They just use the title the white tea. They want to make a difference between the Longjing. So Longjing is a very famous the brand in China. So the people think that we are not different from the Longjing tea. We find a history document belong to the Song Dynasty. This white tea donated to the royal family. So the Song royal family very like the white tea. So the interesting thing is that the president of the White Tea Association was what he find 10 years ago was I mean, he found the first the tea tree not far just in his tea garden. So it's a very significant thing for the white tea museum. Second, like the Ma village museum, they focus on the silk. So the NG we know is very close to the Hangzhou. Hangzhou is very famous for the silk culture. So this area is belong to we call the China style, the history and the culture, like the silk. So one silk firm work with the village to build the garden and also build the museum. So we can see from the picture, the left one is the garden, the second the right one is called the silk culture museum area. They use we call the corridor, not the museum building, to show the village culture, how rich and how long with the silk culture here. So just I mentioned that the general structure of NG Ecomuseum is called the one index museum, or also you can use the one information or we call the Meng Museum, the 12 thematic museums, and we call the multi-exhibition spots. So they change them. They don't want to use the exhibition spots or exhibition sites. They change the exhibition site to the small museum, or we call the specific museum. So. 张武 Tang Museum, they focus on the bamboo fan. So here the Tang has a long history of the bamboo fan industry. So this bamboo fan was sold to the Japan, the royal family, and also the Korea royal family in history. So they studied this the history memory on how the ancestor, how the culture, how high the ancestors built. So so here is the bamboo. The bamboo is the garden, and it's a bamboo culture and art museum. So as we know, the earthquake in 2008. So this museum sent a lot of bamboo to the panda, the basic in Sichuan. They write a letter, hello panda, did you need food? So the panda basic very happy with that. So this as a feedback, they sent the pandas to this bamboo museum. This is the only the county has a panda in China. So this museum is very famous for tourist sites. So a lot of young children would very like to visit this area. So also they focus on some ethnic groups. Shi people is immigrate from the outside of Anji when the reservoir construction built on Shi community, so they will move to the Anji County. So although they are new people of the Anji County, but they want to build their own museums. Shanghai is a very good example. So you know, the Shanghai is the director of the county museum, the hometown, but he don't want to do the Ecomuseum, their first step. So but his little brother is the director of the village. He want to build the Ecomuseum at his hometown. So when the director of the county museum back home, they find his little brother, the director of the village, already built Ecomuseum. So from the beginning, have a different idea of Ecomuseum in all over the Anji County. Quickly move to the construction. The Ecomuseum projects in China have a lot of challenges and have a lot of issues we need to solutions. Like how to preserve, how to make the development and the cultural heritage combined together at the village level, the town level, and the county level. So how to make money? You know, we need to find the money to build the culture, the site, to preserve, to education, to collection, all those issues. So here the table one is the construction table of Anji Ecomuseum. We accepted the three phases. One 2008 2012. Second is 2013 to 2015. Here it is already open to the public. All the museum already open to the public. So construction of Ecomuseum in China have planned a role in the following 6 aspects according to China experience. Ecomuseum effectively practice local tangible heritage and intangible heritage. Also, Ecomuseum can combine the tangible and the intangible heritage together. So also including the natural, environmental, culture, historical, architecture, landscape heritages. Combining with the surrounding area without economic practice, more cultural, natural heritage of traditional town and the village are protected. Ecomuseum promote inheritance, promotion, development, and the protection of local living heritage. The third one is Ecomuseum drives the rise of local ecological tourism and the plant tourism, and has various effects on promoting local economic development. Ecomuseum has a great brand effect indeed, and the naming of ecological museum makes the place nationally famous in only one few years. The third, Ecomuseum provide a multi-vision solution for China industrial heritage protection and utilization. To build Ecomuseum on abandoned industrial sites by protecting and reusing original workers, industry machine, production equipment, and factory building, it can be transformed into an education base that can attract tourism into learning, industry, culture, and civilization, as well as has unique function of site viewing and tourism. That also Ecomuseum project can recreate the traditional industry. So also the Ecomuseum program is the China the museum construction issue. Like we can tell from the new century, a lot of new museums was built in China. So okay, so we can very quickly from 2000 to 2020, almost half 50% of the museum are the new one. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks so much.
My project, as Ms. Meng has said, that it's called the reinscription of memory, valuing informal practices, spatial memory, and local narratives within the physical recovery of Mosul's old town. And it's a part of a overarching British Academy-funded research project. So Mosul is the second biggest city in Iraq, and if anyone knows about Mosul, they will know that it's one of the most affected cities from the ISIS destruction, and it has been the case since the years 2014, 2017, in which it was the mostly affected by these attacks from ISIS. And if we look at the tangible side of the destruction, we can see that the numbers speak for themselves. So we have more than 50,000 destroyed homes in the whole city of Mosul. We have 62 demolished schools. And within the old town of Mosul itself, there are 3,000 destroyed homes, and there are more than 40 heritage sites that are compromised, either destroyed or compromised in terms of some form of damage to their entity. And if we were to visualize that on a map, then we can see that every dot in this map is actually a destroyed place in Mosul. And that kind of gives you an idea of how much destruction took place within the city. And what's interesting is that outside the boundaries of the old town of Mosul, there is significantly less destruction. So there has been a systemic kind of targeting on the old town, maybe for its historic significance, or maybe because of its commercial prominence. So speaking of commercial prominence, the old town itself had more than 4 specialized markets, and these specialized markets held generations of craftsmen, and these craftsmen had really like a specific know-how of creating items, and this know-how has been passed on from generations upon generations. And these are location specific. So there's a street for selling, for example, for goldsmiths selling their gold, and there's a place for blacksmiths, and etc. But if we contrast that against how we have more than 500,000 people that were displaced and more than 40,000 people that have passed away because of the destruction. So we can see that there's some kind of threat that could take place between the physical destruction of these places and the people that vitalize these places, and that they are now not a part of these places anymore. So that kind of leaves these places as a gap, and we will start to question the functionality of these places within the post-war, and we can also start to really interrogate the destiny, let's say, the destiny of the identity of the city and the spatial narratives in which I like to call. So that brings me to my research question, which is, how did the network of physical spaces in Mosul's old town build an ecosystem of cultural heritage practices that are unique to their place? And subsequently, how is this complex cultural heritage being erased following the physical destruction of its hosting spaces? So basically, to kind of simplify this question, is that the places in Mosul did not work in isolation. They related to each other either geographically or functionally. So how did this kind of sensitive network of places was impacted by the war, and how are they being altered in the post-war settings 3 years after the war? So to put my framework in perspective, so I'm looking at post-war societies, post-war cities, architecture of memory, and I'm taking Mosul as a case study. So existing research in Mosul really tackles the place as either a hub for physical landmarks, so it has more than 40 heritage sites, so they tackle these heritage sites, or they tackle the whole city as a lost space, which has lost its identity or meaning, and I argue that I can disagree with that. So this project then tries to bridge this gap between the loss of intangible identity and then the tangible identity, which is the heritage sites. And then it aims to investigate the change over time in the cultural practices in these places, and ultimately create a bottom-up approach to inform. So I was saying that I'm trying to develop a bottom-up approach to inform governments and entities about ways to incorporate these people, put the other 90%, as I always say, as the backbone for reconstruction, and contrast that, my findings about what the people think is important, against what the government is planning for the reconstruction of Mosul. So I'll spare you this kind of all over the place diagram of the methodology, but I'm using qualitative methodologies, starting with a pilot study to engage with the community of Mosul and try to pinpoint the areas of what they think is important before I go to the site, and I will do more kind of walking ethnography and qualitative approaches. So far I've sampled 76 participants, 66 through surveys and 10 through interviews, and I had a specific criteria for choosing them. And this criteria is basically they have to be from Mosul, they have to have engaged with the city. And this is 3 examples from my participants. So on the left, I have, this is a sculpture of one of my participants, and he is a very famous sculptor in Mosul. So it was good to see the places that he used to go to buy his materials, or the places that all the artists gathered to discuss or have workshops in sculpting, etc. And there's also the one on the top right. This is not a participant, but this is one of his workers, because he created a initiative to clear the debris. So he engaged with the city in terms of reconciling the past. And then the one on the bottom right is a photographer, and also photographers, they walk a lot. And so this is just examples of how different participants engaged in the city spaces differently. And I've started to create this ArcGIS maps, because there are no base data for the city as of yet. So I had to create one from scratch. This is a work in progress, so it will be developed as the project goes through. But I started to have the 5 kind of major case studies that I will be looking at. So we have the Nouri Mosque, we have the Sarjkhana Street, we have Bab al-Toub, we have Najafi Street, and Al Sarai Street, and each have their own functionality. So I started to really look into the functionalities of these spaces. So we have governmental, we have some religious spaces, and we have some cultural spaces, and we have some commercial spaces. And then I started to...
Sorry, there are 3 minutes left.
Yeah, I'm almost done. 3 slides left.
Sorry.
That's fine. So I started to also disseminate, to also synthesize what codes are associated with each space. So when they were speaking of, for example, Egypt history, they majorly spoke about the history, the culture, and how they used to buy books from it. So I started to have these codes linking to these places. So this is linking the narratives and the intangible aspects to the tangible aspects as a starting point to have then a deeper look into it when I get access to more information. And I started to also spatially try to understand what these places are. So I started to measure the distances between them. So I found that actually from the furthest two cases, it's around 900 meters distance. So that's around 10 meters walk. So that kind of gives me an idea of how these places connect geographically, and also through these narrow cul-de-sacs and alleyways, which is like a labyrinth, and it's famous in Mosul that it improves the permeability of the city spaces. And all of that was created through a kind of a 2013 base map of Mosul, and then we have a 2018 base map. So 2013 is the year before the war, and 2018 was the year after the war. And I started to manually draw these narrow alleyways and the spaces within the city to end up with an accurate data set of maps. And that kind of helps to understand what places have been destroyed and they were replaced, for example, by a street, and that was the case in many places. And that also helps to understand the city spaces more I can't engage with it physically yet. So this is one way to start to engage with it yet. So what is next for the project? I will start to contrast my findings within these spaces of significance that the locals provided against what the government is planning for Mosul. So to start to understand what kind of places and cities that the government is focusing on against what are they not focusing on, which are otherwise important to the people. I'll continue developing my ArcGIS maps, and I will start to build on current findings to explore the social and cultural elements within the spaces of significance. And that's an ongoing kind of pursuit for my PhD. So thank you a lot for listening, and I look forward to your questions in the Q&A section. Thank you.
I'm going to start my presentation today. I'm going to talk about two projects that practically I have worked. As Miss Lee told, I'm a community architect. So these are actually practical projects that we practiced in Bangladesh. So here is a small introduction about Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a landscape, basically a flat deltaic land, which is a confluence of two mighty rivers, Brahmaputra and Ganges. So there, which is a riverine country, and the places I'm talking about are at the southwest and the southeast part of the country. And next, the first part is about the Rohingya community, which I guess all of you know now. One of the biggest camps in the world is the Rohingya camp in Bangladesh, where the migrants from Myanmar, after the influx happened in August 2017, they migrated to the Cox's Bazar area in Bangladesh. So there is a short description about their influx. There was a short two influxes in 1979, and there was second influxes 1991, and there was the biggest influx in 2017, 25th August. Almost 2 million people came in a day in Bangladesh, and the influx continued until November, and there were 8 million people. So what we know about this community, the community where before the influx, they were living in the Rakhine state for almost 100 years, socially and politically deprived, and their basic needs were all the time were not met. They have a record of very low educational background. They were living in they were always living in a conflict situation with restricted movement. After the influx, when they came to our land, Bangladesh, they had trauma, hopelessness, hunger. The government and other UN organizations gave them hope that they are besides them. And also the host community, the community that was originally there in Cox's Bazar, they also helped them in this chaotic situation. At that time, 600 acre forest land were acquired by them on the time of influx. As first phase, they were given food, water, and clothes, and the second phase was about giving bamboo plastic sheets because, as you know, when they came in Bangladesh, there was the monsoon season, so there was a lot of infrastructural things they were needed, but the protection issue came throughout, and there were sectors you can see on the right side. There are health, education, nutrition, food security, protection, site management, emergency response, shelter, and under protection there are two very vital sections. One is child protection and another is GBV, gender-based violence. So actually I talked about the sectors, and because the model or the I worked in, that's actually under the child protection sector, which is under UNICEF. There was a concept of child-friendly spaces. So child-friendly spaces were the concept of UNICEF. They actually did this to, in emergency response, a safe place for the children, because camps are not always safe. There are many chances. So, but in BIED, Brack Institute of Educational Development, they are actually work for early years learning and childhood development with play-based learning methodology, physical well-being, and stakeholders from diverse socio-economic background. When BRAC ID went to this camp situation with their previous situations, they found cultural relevancy in the community. They found they wanted to give some structural intervention for the children, which is early childhood, based on the ECD or early childhood development. And they started reconstructing their play lab model, which have in different sections all over, for these children in the camps in the lens of healing, because they came from a trauma. So also the initially the objective was to initiate a learning and healing through play for the children. The model started on September 2018. Inside the CFS, the child-friendly spaces, there was the curriculum for 2 hours, which was for the 2 to 6 years old children. So what we tried to do from 2018, there were the curriculum included native poems, cultural and physical games, for which were actually collected through FGDs and various interviews from the locality. And as architects, we were asked to give some relevance in the structural sense, in the space they play or they stay, to give something in the play labs. So that's how our work started in the camps as architects. So when we went there, there were 3 phases of this project. The first phase was about a very unconstructed interaction with the community. There were questions, there were FGDs, there were model making, and on the right hand side, you can see we did this with the children, with the parents, with the grandparents, with the play leaders. There are community leaders, there were religious leaders in the community. We did it with all of them. And the second phase was formulating a process that we found from the previous interaction. And on the second phase, we actually did more focused, and we actually formed some very focused activities, and we did all over the camp to just verify, validate it. And the third was to scale up plan, because we had almost over 300 play labs there. So we have to come up with a plan that we can scale up, and also implementing within a budget. So this is one of the play labs in the camps, and how the children reach there. They reach through this piece. It's all hilly, and there is no actually proper roads. There no actually proper connections. It was back in 2018. Now these things have changed a bit. The first, as I said, as in the first phase, we just interacted. Sometimes we were just gossiping. Sometimes we were talking with the men. Sometimes we just watched the children to play, how they play, where they play. Sometimes we ask them to draw. That some of the children draw. That girl draw. She's 12 years old. She wants a pot of plant, and she wants to collect rainwater. Another one, like a boy who wrote he likes flowers. So then again, we talked with women. She actually drew her from her memory, her home in Myanmar, and where his children played, where was which tree. This is a coconut tree. There is his kitchen. That's she had some designs on the ceilings of her house, her gate, and everything. Then sometimes we made model with the locals, and we asked them how they make very good structures. So they taught us. And we asked about colors. So they painted these types of paintings. There were lots of paintings. And sometimes we visited inside that, how they're intervening inside their shelters. That's how some women took us inside their shelter. Then you can see that she have a ceiling drape, and which they have a very special name, and she also decorated it with mud, her bed. So then we came back for the before the second phase. We tried to compose the things that which things we can go for and which are we can put in our play lab. So came up with the drape, which is a shamiana. They use this, women say they use it inside their houses, and that used to make the house more cooler. And that makes sense because in the camps, the situation is very congested. So very good ventilation was needed. And also about art, they love to draw art. And we came to know about their favorite colors. And we found them drawing in a very distinctive pattern, which is not very usual in like a children, or they have a pattern of drawing that we found. So the next phase we have a very specific plan to make the shamiana in different camps, that if all the whole community is relevant with this material or this product, or then all the whole community is very relevancy in art. So this is how we practiced in almost 5 places. They were not near, in different parts of the camps. That's how they were drawing. And in the play labs, we asked them to make this shamiana for their children and how they can make. Some of them drew on the cloth and sew them. Some of them wanted to have some colorful clothes and just sew them some. So, and also we asked the children to draw, and again they came up with these distinctive patterns. And we asked them to where they want to draw in the play lab. So some of them draw in the doors, and you can see the very small changes, but they seamlessly they were drawing, and they came up with these things. And sometimes we painted white, and we asked them, and they did this type of drawings. And for the third phase, so after doing this, we came up that we will be doing very, we were going for all our 300 centers that we will be making the shamiana according to the size, and there will be flings on the sides, because all the places we found, the women wants to have the flings, and then painting on the door and how we can incorporate these things. So
Sorry,
this was
3
the
minutes
result.
left.
How
3
much?
minutes left. 3.
Okay. So this actually came. And the second project is about a workshop we did in a weaver's village. They weave baskets, bamboo baskets, and this village was under a development project, and there is a resort they're making, and it is an eco resort type, and the architect wanted to have no boundary, or wanted to have a very good connection with the bounding community. So she wanted to make the community a part of the project. So that's why we did a workshop with one of our famous she's a craft developer, Chandrasekhar Shah. We were helping and guiding. These are the weavers from those village. They are the craftsmen, and we actually did the workshop for 3 days. They usually make baskets, and we asked on the first day, we actually asked them what they usually make and how they make, what they use, like they use these tools to make, and we know their steps, how they make those baskets step by step. Also, we talked with them. We talked to them about their living and why they're losing this craft, why they cannot survive living with this task, why it is getting harder, and walked. And that's how, while talking, we know their technique at the end of the day. And after that, on the second day, we sat chat with the women and the similar ways. So we found some distinctive, like the women are mostly doing the works of shaping or doing these things, and the men were mainly weaving or doing the hard works. But it's a complete process, a family process, we found. We try to incorporate new materials and new techniques on their existing patterns. Like they used to like normally, and we used clothes or different other materials that were found there, like small bamboo leaves. So these are the new products came out. There is a picture of this man because he actually is very passionate, and we found him after 3 days of workshop that he it's a basket. He wanted to make it in a reverse, like a sitting tool. So he came up with that. Oh,
Sorry,
great.
your time's up. And could you please just use one sentence or a word to summarize your
Okay.
presentation,
So,
please?
yeah, this was the last slide. So that's how we came up with them. And I just wanted to add, like, it was I've worked with communities, and it was all about bringing out their nostalgia in the space, and they're talking about their memories. That was bringing up small things and making it a part of their big life, which was they were losing behind. So that's all. Thank you.
I'll start by introducing you to the IKTT and talking a little bit about, I guess, kind of a brief intro. So the Khmer Rouge took power in 1975 and carried out a devastating agenda of mass killings. They targeted doctors, lawyers, journalists, artists, and students, as well as ethnic Vietnamese and Cham Muslims. Private property, money, religion, and traditional culture were abolished, which included the once praised textile culture. The regime lost power in 1979, followed by a civil war that continued into the early 90s. It's reported that Cambodia lost a quarter to 1/5 its population, and the people that survived were left in extreme poverty and deeply traumatized. Kikyo Morimoto created the IKTT after witnessing the catastrophic impact for himself whilst carrying out field research in 1995. The IKTT was set up to provide opportunities for skilled weavers to pass their experience on to the next generation in a holistic approach which focuses on the raw materials, natural environment, and community structures necessary to weave traditional silk textiles. Here you can see some pictures of the IKTT today next to an old photo of a village taken before the war. I'm going to briefly introduce you to some of the traditional types of Khmer textiles so you can get a general idea about the context of heritage and subsequent efforts to preserve the knowledge. The whole Padan is a traditional silk wall hanging, historically found in Cambodia, particularly in the southern regions. These 4-meter long pictorial textiles were hung on the ceilings of Buddhist temples above the main Buddha statue. It's reported that until the early 70s and before the rise of the Khmer Rouge, women in villages would weave the whole Padan and offer them to the nearest pagoda or monastery. These large wall hangings display Buddhist imagery such as Tree of Life and often depicted scenes of the Buddha's past lives. These textiles are made using a technique called ikat, and the technique is found in textile centers around the world, from India, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, Japan, Africa, and Latin America. So here you can see part of the process. Now ICAT is a very laborious process, and it's a type of resist dyeing. So all the threads are dyed before they are then woven. And it's common for Khmer ikat to be dyed 3 or more times before weaving, with using natural dye techniques passed down through generations. Most of the knowledge is transferred orally, nothing's written down, and it's generally passed on through family members, mother to daughter, or within the community. Now, alongside the padan, there are several other types and styles of textiles that range from everyday use to more luxurious fabrics weaved for ceremonies or worn by the elite. And the most luxurious, on the right, you can see the sampot hole. Sampot meaning wrapped skirt, while hole means ikat. And there is much debate between scholarly articles as to the precise origins of Khmer silk weaving. While some accounts and the widely believed narrative date the origins as far back as the Angkor dynasty, taking their cue from the carvings on the walls of the Angkor temples, other conflicting arguments gathered from research of old Chinese, British, and French merchant records from the 17th and 18th century claim sericulture to have arrived as late as 1870 due to Chinese immigration from the troubled silk weaving districts surrounding the Pearl River. The confusion is exacerbated by the oral transmission of textile skills, creating generations of Chinese whispers that has changed over centuries and decades depending on the socio-political mood of the times. From the days of the Khmer kings to French colonialism, all the way through to the Khmer Rouge and present-day Cambodia. For example, the academic John Terhorst reports accounts of Khmer with Chinese heritage who went through great lengths to disguise their Chinese heritage through fear of persecution, meaning several histories are easily transformed and misrepresented depending on who you talk to, as the lives of those in villages are not always represented or documented. During the Khmer Rouge, the regime saw the sampot hole as the symbol of the elite, and the practice was actively destroyed. To further put the origins of the IKTT into context, I'd like to introduce you to Kikyo Morimoto, who is the founder of the IKTT. He was a textile artisan and natural dye expert from Japan. He was brought up in the apprenticeship system of Kyoto's renowned kimono district and was trained in the art of yuzen painting, which is a method of resist dyeing similar to batik, which you can see on the right. He was born in 1948, so he grew up in Japan through a period of rapid change, living his early years through the scarcity of the Second World War and his 20s through an era of modernization as new value systems emerged. In 1983, he left his job to volunteer on the refugee camps on the Thai-Khmer border and to volunteer at a weaving school, and ended up spending the next 13 years in Thailand, helping to set up textile projects in rural areas and teaching natural dye at the Institute of Technology in Bangkok, whilst also setting up a naturally dyed silk shop in Bangkok to support local weavers. He was a passionate and self-confessed silk fanatic dedicated to supporting artisans. He encountered Khmer silk for the first time in 1980, hanging in the Bangkok National Museum, and was blown away by the skill demonstrated in such fine work. He immediately wondered whether such skills prevailed in Cambodia. So in 1994, on a trip to renew his visa, he travelled into the rural village of Pei, following a tip-off from the markets in Phnom Penh. UNESCO, who were working in Cambodia at the time, were impressed with his early research and decided to commission a research report. In 1995, he spent a year going from village to village, collecting information on the status of silk production. There were no maps, and most of the roads were destroyed, so he travelled with one assistant, mostly by foot, car and moped, around southeastern Cambodia and the areas surrounding Phnom Penh. The conclusion of his research painted a sorry picture for the future of Khmer silk production. As a maker and craftsman himself, Morimoto's research centered on the technical processes of silk production with regards to natural dye techniques, sericulture, and the ability to make a living from silk production. On listening to accounts from villagers, it became evident that until 1970, many villages were engaged in sericulture activities. However, At the time of the report, most of the yarn in use was white machine-spun silk imported from Vietnam, of which the prices have been rapidly increasing year by year. Another finding from his report was a disconnection between the use of chemical dyes and their application. At the time of his report, most people had moved to using chemical dyes. However, there was a disconnect between the knowledge and use of chemical dyes compared to that of natural dyes. The ones sold in the market were known for their colours washing out easily because a lot of villagers were using chemical dyes in the same way they would natural dyes. He observed that villagers soaked ikat-tied silk yarn in the dye mixture without boiling it, and then they swing the yarn like a whip and strike it against a large wooden tub several times, after which they soak it again. The practice is necessary for dyeing either red or indigo, but not for chemical dyes. At the time of his research, there were only a few women, an aging generation, who retained the knowledge of the old techniques. For the weavers that continued their craft, they were often taken advantage of by middlemen who drove a hard bargain, and young people were less attracted to go into the profession. Furthermore, creating ikat textiles is a long and arduous process that often takes the efforts of the whole community, not just the individual weaver. Different members of the community would have different expertise, some with a knowledge for textile dyeing with indigo, some with lac. Others would concentrate on sericulture and spinning. Others on tying and weaving, and so forth. The fragmented communities left behind by the war meant that much of this knowledge had now dispersed, making it easier for weavers to buy imported silk and chemical dyes from the market. This development changed the quality of the products, and the lack of sufficient income meant weavers would not practice their skills to the full level of their capabilities. So this is when Morimoto started coming up with ideas to collaborate with villagers. Through his discussions, it was evident that they wanted to continue silk weaving. However, the infrastructure that they once relied upon had been destroyed. From an old lady he recounts in his 1995 report, from an old lady who was weaving, I learned of a village up ahead, and that village was Tekor. I was surprised to find virtually a complete set of equipment for raising silkworms surviving in Tekor. After a while, all that equipment was lined up in front of us, along with a loom. Later, I paid another visit to Tekor village. My survey was nearly completed, and it had become clear that as a result of the war, silk raising and silk weaving had been virtually extinguished. I began to ask myself what might be done about this. I wanted to ask the old men I had met during my survey whether they thought there was a chance of reviving silkwork production. On my first visit, some people said they would like to try if the chance arose. I went back to confirm that of us. Several villagers gathered, and the conversation moved enthusiastically to the direction of reviving silkworm production. Following their conversations, Morimoto had been working with refugees in Thailand who had maintained some of their silk weaving production in the rural areas. He brought new silkworms and started a new initiative in Tekor province. Reviving sericulture is not without its difficulties, especially during the complex and sometimes problematic culture of international aid and disaster relief. Morimoto recounts other moments where his efforts were met with similar enthusiasm but misguided intentions. A large part of the reviving silkworm production is about ensuring the growth of mulberry trees, which the silkworms use as food. And he'd met villagers in Battambang province who expressed interest in restarting silk production. He sent the village a number of seedlings. However, on returning, he discovered the seedlings had vanished. The village head didn't pass the seedlings to the group. Oh, I'm gonna hurry up a bit. And then we see here, we also have, there was issues with the destruction of the natural environment. One of the insects which thrived in Cambodia before the war was the lac insect. The lac insect produces a red color for naturally dyeing silk. However, due to the deforestation, it destroyed the habitat of the lac, much to the dismay of many villagers who kind of had thought if they'd kept the trees which the lac survived on, that the lac would survive. However, once the surrounding trees had been cut down, it passed away. So there are a few issues and it affects.
Sorry, Antonia, there's 2 minutes actually
2 minutes.
left.
Okay, sorry. So he started to realize it'd be impossible to continue silk production without the natural environment. So in 2002, he started up Project Wisdom from the Forest, which was a project originally as 5 hectares of land made to produce all the materials they needed for silk weaving. Today, almost 18 years later, the land has stretched to 23 hectares of land and a community of 150 staff, where people come and visit the village for different purposes, mostly for natural dye research and expertise. And I guess, because of the time, I'm going to move through a bit quicker. But over the years, the tradition has expanded to include topics of the different types of natural dye materials. So traditionally, Cambodian silk with the black color is dyed with ebony or red mixed with indigo. However, new techniques have started to come out of their research, including the use of Indian almond, which produces the black color, which you can see on the right, the wood of the lychee tree and the husks of coconut shells. So the tradition and the practices have started to evolve and take on a new meaning as the centre functions as an active research institute. Kikyo Morimoto passed away in 2017, and since then control and ownership of the organisation has gone over to key members of the community and his staff, who have all been with the village for 18 years. Midori Iramoto also works at the village. She's from Japan and was with Morimoto for the final 3 years and continues to maintain the, I guess, international connections with Japan, who are most of their customers. However, that has created, I guess, today in the a time of COVID, a lot of issues as they've lost their customers, they've lost the international trade, and now there's a lot of questions as to how that might, how the village might survive. However, new technology and new ways of interacting with those customers are coming to light, as well as villages are starting to adopt the use of technology themselves with iPhones and better internet connection.
It's a revolutionary concept. It's come from France and then it expanded to Europe and in all over the world. The main objectives of the movement is to develop the local communities and amalgamate them into the mainstream for the wider development. I mean, more improvements and all these things. The concept of the ecology came from the Greek word oikos, which means the household or living place. Now, if you see the title of the presentation, it has the ecology and it has a community. So from the earliest discussions on the characteristics features of ecomuseums was based on an ecological point of view. Thus, they must truly reflect the development of cultural and economic life in relations to the conditions and limitations that has been set by the natural surroundings of the region. Of heritage. To preserve heritage in its original environment, which is called the Setu, and called Ecomuseum. Now, eco is community refers to Ecomuseum as a community-based museum, while open-air museum do not include a community. So this is the difference between a museum, a general museum that we go, and it's an ecomuseum. The traditional museums, the community, heritage, natural environment are separate, while ecomuseum interconnected each other by expressing that the preservation of heritage is a part of the local community, and the local community is a part of the natural environment. The principle of these ecomuseums, so these are some narratives and principles I can say. This is the community relationships and involvement, authenticity, location defined by the experimental, dynamic and community-led, pride and identity of the peoples and the Aboriginal people of Canada, the Red Indian in the United States, and Indian tribal people in India. The spirituality and personal discovery and expression, exclusive and collaborative agreement, social and environmental responsibility, and building feedback for the decision making. So these are the principles of Ecomuseum, we can say. There are a lot of things, but it's the concept. Now, there are lots of also the systems and concept of Ecomuseum, but the main are the landscape and the participation, or we can say the involvement. The idea of community development exists with a number of conceptual models, such as a sense of place. A sense of place means a territorial location, which is attachment of its territory. The concept of sense of place ties the natural and social environment to the local community for the sharing past and to create a common future. So the past and future, both sides. The sense of place has been described by Ralph. So there are various scholars by saying that people will be more motivated to protect existing places, and it will be done by their long experiences and attachment with their land for a long time. Earlier, another scholar said that intent thus turns into an inhabited place from a conceptual or abstract place that through place making. So Arler is the writer of the involvement method, and the Ralph is for the territorial or geographical landscape. So according to some other scholars, the authentic place is an area with a group of people belonging to the place that helps those to make a sense of belongingness or get together with their landscape. Therefore, those scholars suggested that the authenticity is another important system of many aspects should be linked with community involvement. So that is, Ecomuseum has the potential to integrate both agriculture. Agriculture means agriculture technique, traditional crafts, and tourism. And on the other side is the sales of the local product. So it has then clarified that the Ecomuseum has the potentiality to integrate the local community's sense of authenticity based on production, which is traditional, and with the authenticity by tourism, which is based on consumption. So it has a both side, like economy and tradition. So now, as I live in Canada, in the Prairie region, the Saskatchewan is one of the provinces the majority Aboriginal people lives in Saskatchewan, and therefore we know exactly like general museum or traditional museum we go. Is a concept mixed by the Heritage Saskatchewan and museum discussed with the local communities of Saskatchewan. So they said everything, but they discussed with those. That means they're in a reserve and off reserve in Saskatchewan. Ecomuseum, according to Saskatchewan, approach standing and celebrating an authentic cultural landscape that has been created by nature and by the human. So it is both. It is a holistic approach based on culture and tradition through which the people can adapt and promote the region, heritage, and sense of place to the rest of the world. It has role. I'm sorry to say it has no roles. It has role in municipal cultural planning in Saskatchewan, a community-driven program on holistic downtown project, which is called the Main Street Project, and the link park for the preservation of wild plants and animals, the protections and preservation of biological, ethnological, historical, and other scientific objects. So in Saskatchewan, the Ecomuseum in the Nipi-1 area has focused on features of the Torch River forest that also includes the local mushroom industry. So these are some examples of Saskatchewan Ecomuseum. It has also linked with community museums through the participation of locals, so draws and range of local assets for the address to the tourists on its local importance. The Ecomuseum Zoo in Quebec is for the dedication of wildlife safety and protect species and elements from the danger. I would like to also say, I think the art and the society are also a part of ecomuseums, because art and society, sometimes we will say art, the concept of art about the world and the real world are different, but art and society say they're not different. Whatever the art people paint or something looks like that about the world, it is a genuine, and it has also reflect the concept of ecomuseum. So I would add that the art and the society are also a part of ecomuseum. I would like to say about the Ecomuseum in China. So the next, please. Thank you. So the village of Qingmiao now is a major destination on ethnic tours to the Guangzhou province due to the establishment of an ecomuseum for the development of the local community and heritage of the village. Mrs. Yang and her family were grateful to receive government support to move out of their overall house into a new housing settlement. The infrastructural development for the development of Qingmiao village, such as the Project Hope. This is an example. The primary school helps for the children of the new settlement. So China, one of the best things that they have a model village through which they are helping people, especially from the people of ethnic and something like that. The role of museum in China was to create social changes to mobilize the traditional and collective memories as the key concept of national identifier. The Ecomuseum shares the culture of the museum that reflects the cultural stewardship in China. Its contribution to become a part of the nationwide heritage protections and campaign to allow the state in various destinations to pursue its national and regional integration, political stability, and economic development. So it is mainly through the social, economic, and demographic features of China that the Ecomuseum concept is helping. The Chinese scholars focus to protect the endangered ethnic and folk cultures by introducing local level heritage protections, approaches, and ideas. And Gaussian logic, this is one of the logic that they followed by the scholars to implement such experimental initiative to help the local populations. According to Su Donggai, who is the forefather of the Chinese Ecomuseum movement, the concept of Ecomuseum in China has explained to move beyond the initial concern from the protection of natural landscapes and distinct local cultures to be implicated in a vast development. The museum in China is thus contributing to the expansion of the cultural heritage industry, and on the other side, mechanism to increase the economic development of the poverty-stricken ethnic minority region. So China is basically doing two sides: one of the development of the traditions, and another from the economic development for the economic development of the country and for the people. Now, because we have the movement of Ecomuseum has been utilized for the advancement of economic development, and therefore the focus has been transmitted from the local development to the development of tourism, and thus it enhances the idea of marketing value. So that we are actually, the concept of the Ecomuseum is changing from one stream to another stream. The economic development may raise in Ecomuseum a shifting idea from tourism development, and the change can be dangerous for the safety of the heritage protections and preservations, and leading to unbalanced community development. And it has transformed from community development into a marketing device. So again, it has transformed the community development to the marketing device, the economic. The meaning of the Ecomuseum is for the innovation of local democracy and its continuous development. But in some cases, it has been diverted from the local development into tourism development. It is the demand of the tourist for the economic purposes rather than the thinking of the locals. So the example I am telling about the France, because as I say, the France is the first country that this concept has been explored. So the Lacrosse and two others of the Cine Venice in France benefit the tourist interest more than they support the local development. Few developing countries are also focusing on locals' living standard rather than the heritage protection according to their emphasis as an Ecomuseum rule. So also some developing countries has made the definition of the Ecomuseum in their own way, falling down from the real definition or the standard of the Ecomuseum. So this is very unfortunate as well. The concept of sense of the place is different by scholars, such as Massey say it is a global concept than an isolated territorial concept. He expressed that place implies connection to the outside world instead of isolation. However, on the other side, Wolvik, another scholar, he expressed a sense of place as a specific isolated territorial due to the tight connection between landscape and sense of place. So these are some issues in the Ecomuseum that creates a cross definition of the narratives. So I would like to say, from the beginning to the end that I expressed, the Ecomuseum has two kinds of concept, that is ecology, and it's also my title of my PowerPoint of my paper, the ecology and the human development. But sometimes the people make ecomuseum by their own way, especially in the developing country, and included the developed country as well, for the for the profit of the government and for the profit of the tourists, rather than the development of the community and ethnic societies and all these things. Even in China, I heard that according to the locals, that the Chinese government and for the tourism, they are taking the priorities for the demand of the Chinese government and the authorities of the local authorities and all these things, instead of the development of the people. So they are focusing them instead of focusing the local peoples of China and all these things. So we should not give in priorities over those things, but we should prioritize the rules and regulations that has been set up by the international standard of the ecomuseums, instead of making by ourselves about the definition of the ecomuseum and concept. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. So the project I'm going to talk about is Discovering Southville. It's a nascent ecomuseum project, and I'm going to think particularly about how the community first approach that we used for that project can help to establish a polyvocal and inclusive project right from the beginning. But I'm also going to think a little bit about the challenges that approach can bring. And then the next speaker actually is going to talk about the same project and is going to think a bit more about how we used collaborative community mapping to establish a sense of place. So the project is really very much at the beginning stages, and with the current pandemic happening, I think it needs to re-evaluate its aims and objectives a little bit. I'm going to say something about that at the end. So Southville itself is a small market town in Nottinghamshire. It has a population of around 7,000, and it has a long history starting from a pre-Roman times. Two of the things it's most famous for is the 12th century minster and the workhouse, which is a National Trust site. And even though it has a lot of different other heritage assets, such as a Bramley apple, it also has a lace history and a lot of natural habitats, such as the Potville Dyke grasslands. It's very much dominated by the minster and the workhouse, and a lot of the community feel that maybe other important heritage sites don't get as much attention. So the community itself is really passionate about the heritage, and they are already involved in protecting it, but all the different groups don't really work together, and all the activities they do seldom really reach beyond the group that organizes them. So Southville actually has wanted more of a traditional museum for a long time. So the Southville Heritage Trust was established 10 years ago in 2010 with the idea of establishing a heritage center that would allow Southville to display all of its history. However, due to funding issues, those plans never really materialized, and the trust started to do a lot of other activities. So one of the things they did was to save the Roman villa in Southville from being used for housing. But then in 2008, when the second attempt to procure a building failed, the members of the Southville Heritage Trust decided that maybe a bit of a different approach was needed. And the original idea was to have a virtual museum, even though I don't think they really weren't particularly sure what they meant by virtual museum. So it was more kind of a place to document heritage. So they contacted NTU in 2018 and met with the heritage development team. And after talking to them, we noticed that quite a lot of their aims actually were really close to what Ecomuseum guidelines and Ecomuseum philosophy is all about. So what they wanted to do was to bring all the diverse projects in Southwell together. They wanted to engage more young people and to develop a sustainable tourism in addition to that kind of virtual or more traditional museum approach. So after talking to them, we did decide that we were thinking of if the Ecomuseum would be one possibility for Southwell, but one of the challenges is that it's actually not a concept that's very well known in the UK. So there are only 5 Ecomuseums in the UK, and there are other projects that, such as the Land of Oak and Iron, that are thinking about using Ecomuseum principles, but haven't quite come around to this idea. And in my opinion, it's a really missed opportunity, and there's several theories of why this is. One of the ideas is that it doesn't really translate very well into English. So often when people hear eco or museum, they think it's kind of a natural history museum. But I think the other problem, and that's something we really face with discovering Southwell, that it seems really tricky to separate the idea of heritage and history, particularly if you're talking about heritage in a more official sense from the idea of having a building and displaying it in a more traditional way. But for the group, it was also really positive to see that there were projects in the UK that managed to display the heritage without necessarily having to have a heritage center, because, and especially now, it's questionable if the group will ever have the funding to actually have a heritage center. Initially, we kind of settled on not calling it an Ecomuseum, but we decided on a few aims that were kind of in line with Ecomuseum principles. So we wanted to promote Southwell's heritage, history, culture, and natural landscape. We wanted to have an inclusive and all-encompassing interpretation of Southwell that included past, but also present and future. We wanted to encourage individual participation, but also build on partnerships with existing groups, organizations, and businesses, and really wanted to give them a framework so that the projects that were already existing were linked up a little bit better, but also that would enable people to do something new. And we also wanted to celebrate Southwell's history. So today I'm going to look at the kind of community first methodologies that aim polylocality from the beginning and the foundations of the project. And I'm not going to talk that much about the actual results, but if you are interested, there's a report on the consultation process on the Discovering Southwell website. So the community, so as a methodology, we did decide to have community first planning and a human design approach. Community first design is kind of based on a theory on an idea by Nina Simon, who thinks that instead of coming up with a program and finding an audience for it, museums really should develop the programming with the community. One of the ways to do that is to spend some time with the community and attend events that are relevant to them, and by asking questions such as, what's missing in your community? What are you most proud of? What do you love about your community? And similarly, the human design approach also tries to develop programs and make something new, which is driven by the needs and desires of local communities. So we did receive some global heritage seed corn funding for this project by NTU. And so in the spring, summer of 2019, we developed a concept of community consultation. And we did start rather traditional with a survey, and a rather simple survey as a starting point. They were supposed to be exploratory, and that was meant to introduce people to the project, but also to listen and respond to the needs of the community, to make sure that we could establish something that was really beneficial for Southwell. But we also wanted to encourage people to think about volunteering and use that survey to help us to develop a funding bit. So questions in the survey, but also all the consultancy and introduction activities we did were guided by those 5 Ecomuseum tenets that were developed by Corsain et al. In 2007. And we used this to get people to thinking about what an Ecomuseum could mean for Southwell. So for example, with the territory, the first tenant, we talked to people about what they thought could be part of this. So a lot of people kind of thought about Southwell in a smaller sense, but others also said had really important connections to Newark with the Civil War. And other people even mentioned that there's a Southwell in South Africa that had connections. So people really thought about territory in really different ways. We tried to identify different cultural touchstones and think about what organizations and groups were important in the local community, what kind of benefits people wanted to achieve out of this. So we decided to, rather than actually going with a pre-designed problem or a pre-designed program, we decided to go to the community and ask them what they want, basically with a blank page. And I think it would have been actually a lot easier if we would have already given them an idea, but why we decided to go with community first planning is that we were very aware of the fact that actually the people establishing the Ecomuseum were sort of a self-appointed group, and they are very aware of that fact as well, and they were not necessarily representative of the whole community. So the 5 community members who are most involved in establishing the Ecomuseum are not very diverse. So 4 out of 5 members are male and 4 out of 5 members are in retiring age. So it only represents a certain aspect of the community. And the other thing is that we also diverged quite a bit from what the original idea was. So we wanted to make sure that we had community support. And then the other problem was that Southwell also has quite a long history of poor communication of what is happening in the town, and people feeling excluded, particularly from either kind of groups or heritage sites. We really wanted to make sure that we would get to know everyone and give everyone the opportunity to have a voice in this. What we did was kind of relatively standard at the beginning. So we started with creating a website and did a poster and media campaign and had a relatively traditional quantitative questionnaire that was available online, but we also sent it out to every household with the local newspaper, the Bramley Apple. But then in order to talk to people and to encourage them to fill out the questionnaire, we did something a bit more innovative. So we took our idea from Moore, who decided to, if you want to have a holistic community representation, you really have to put on your sneakers and walk our neighborhoods and introduce ourselves in new ways. So over a 3-month period, from the beginning of April through late June, that's basically exactly what we did. So within those 3 months, we put on 12 consultation events and activities, and we created a bespoke business survey. And we also attended 4 community events and groups to raise the awareness of the project. The local high school got involved, which added 300 respondents that were under 16, which is really great because normally it's really hard to reach this group. And we also had several meetings with local organizations about the project and about possible future collaborative relationships. So what we also, we really made sure that we could seek out different demographics, and we also made sure that we went to the communities rather than waiting for them to come to us. So we visited sheltered housing groups, we joined family and community events, we went to local markets, to the leisure center, to the library, to pubs and to businesses. And one of the things that was really important for us is to give something back to the communities. So to not just give them information and ask for information from them, but also to create a kind of an interesting and fun event that would also show them what potential the Ecomuseum would have. So what we did is, so we did those family craft and information events. So this shows us doing crafts with children at the Leisure Center and at the Southwell Fun Day. And so while we did craft activities that linked to local heritage and intangible heritage and nature with the children, we talked to the parents about the project and asked them to fill out the questionnaire. We had several information days and community events we participated in. So in the library, we had a week-long interactive displays where people could share what was special to them about Southwell. And then we hosted an information day where we talked about the Ecomuseum concept, but also where we had displays of local heritage and of natural heritage. We joined Bramley apple, or we planting at the local fruit farm. We went to folk nights. We visited an ancient village with the history society, just so we could talk and get people's opinions. We also organized a storytelling event in the Saracen's Head, which is the pub where King Charles spent his last night of freedom during the English Civil War. So we had a professional storyteller as entertainment, but then we also asked the community to share their stories about Southwell. And then we invited local sports groups to a sport-themed pub quiz. And in addition to that, we also offered more in-depth focus groups to talk to people about what they wanted and to be a bit more in-depth than the questionnaire. And we also brought a giant map and asked people to map what places were important to them. We also devised the bespoke business survey. So Southwell is really special in the sense that 95% of its businesses are independent and that it has a really rich artist and maker scene. So one important aspect of the Ecomuseum was for us to have kind of a mutual beneficial relationship with the local businesses and makers, and to encourage sustainable development and artist interpretation to facilitate a community identity in the area. And it's already had a bit of success. So there was a pop-up art project with the Southwell Workhouse that was hosted by some of the local shops in the community earlier in the year. So overall, we put on 16 events. We engaged about 650 people in person, and we got 806 people to complete the survey. 37 businesses filled out the local business survey, and 198 subscribers. People subscribed to the newsletter, and we also had a really popular community mapping project about what Victoria is going to talk about. There were a few main themes emerging from the Cultancy project, but one of them that was the most important one was that kind of just really link well to the Ecomuseum principles, as that people wanted a more joined up approach in community life and in cultural life, but they also wanted Southwell as a place to be more joined up. So they wanted to have more interpretation around the town, better signage to direct people around the town, better cycle paths. So kind of linking everything up was really an important topic. And the other important issue was that they wanted to have more options for younger people, especially for those who were between 11 and 24-year-old. So out of this, the group developed 3 main objectives, so that they wanted to invest in the heritage, in their people, and in their community. And they came up with 6 themes. So they wanted to have access for everyone, a more creative interpretation around the town, a visitor hub, education activities. There was, especially from the survey, and that wasn't really in the objectives before, a lot of young people said that they wanted to have more environmental action. So that was included as one of the themes. And the other thing is that the virtual museum, or the idea of having an online presence, was still there. So there are a lot of challenges for community first planning. It's very complex, it's time consuming, and it's also really challenging to develop. It's also not really well known, so a lot of people didn't really understand. So it took us a while to gain their trust and explain why we didn't present them with an already thought out concept, but why we were asking them. And it's also quite tricky to to take it further from the step. So once you have the community planning and it lined out, what do you do next? And I'm going to say a little bit about that in the next slide. But so I think it's really valuable, because I think if you include everyone's opinion, you have a greater chance of being success. It's more relevant, and hopefully the project would also be more sustainable. But it is also tricky so at the moment, because it's still, you know, a little bit up in the air, and a lot of Ecomuseums have that problem. The group is really reluctant to ask more volunteers to come in, because they're worried about disappointing people. So we really need to encourage them to open up the project. And we also need to think about how we can bring more stakeholders on board in a way that the group feels comfortable. We are thinking about a national lottery funding bid. So we're going to put one together in May, which now originally obviously had to stop, but we are thinking about, you know, how once the new funding criteria is out, how the project can fit in. So the pandemic is quite challenging, obviously, for the Ecomuseum project. There's going to be a new funding landscape, so we might have to rethink about how we want to do things. But at the same time, it's also positive in a way that there's a renewed sense of interest in the local. You know, people have been walking their local area and have been noticing different things. It also shows the importance of local community and the importance of health and well-being. So hopefully the Ecomuseum project could be really supportive in those terms. Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, so thanks for the introduction. I worked with Kat as part of the consultation team for Discovering Southwell as part of my master's placement. I was doing Masters in Museum and Heritage with Kat at Nottingham, Trent. And I also used the consultation process as part of a case study for my dissertation on community engagement in eco-museums. So as part of that, throughout the various consultation activities, we'd encourage people to share their stories of Southwell and so define what makes Southwell special to the community. The focus groups, where we map the community's cultural touchstones, the storytelling evening and the Southwell Fun Day event, where people map their own stories, in particular, elicited really positive responses from the community, with individuals and groups really engaging with the idea. Although it hadn't been part of the original plan, it seemed judicious to kind of develop this further and create a community mapping project that would utilise the stories and places that are already given to us and extend and widen this engagement further. A flexible approach allowed the consultation to be an evolving process, and the mapping project opened out the space for interpretation of the landscape by many different voices. The follow-on project that developed out of the consultation process had two main parts. Firstly, a series of walks through the landscape to map the sites given to us, and then the creation of a digital map using the sites put forward by the community with their own interpretation. This entailed the culmination of the community mapping exercises we'd already carried out during the early consultation events, and the follow-on engagement through social media, where individuals could define in their own terms where is special to them and why. This became a way to extend the consultation period after the main survey phase was over, maintaining and building on the momentum that we'd already garnered through that period over the quiet period of the summer while the statistical analysis was being done on the survey results. Discovering Southwell profile would remain in the public consciousness, and in creating a dynamic online map, it brought together the stories and insights the community had already shared to create something tangible that they could see, share and interact with immediately. Further to this, I combined it with a social media campaign using website, Discovering Southwell website, Twitter, Facebook and a Walks blog. And this allowed more people to find out about Discovering Southwell and the Walking Mapping Project, and encouraged and allowed more people to join in and share their own favourite places and special sites. The concept of community mapping isn't new. The use of parish maps as a means of encouraging collaborative exploration of community identity was first pioneered by the not-for-profit group Common Ground. Parish maps have been promoted by Common Ground since the mid-1980s as a lively way of socially exploring and demonstrating what people value in their own place, to build identity and pride in local distinctiveness of places. Making a parish map can help people come together to chart things that they value locally, to make their voices heard amongst professionals and developers, to inform and assert their need for nature and culture on their own terms, and to begin to take action, some control in shaping the future of their place. Peter Davis sees the idea of a sense of place as key to the Ecomuseum ethos, and has promoted the creation of parish maps as a tool to engage the community in self-definition. So you've got two examples here. The one at the top is one of the Common Ground ones that they originally did, and the lower one is one from an eco-museum in Italy that have taken on the idea and concept and created what they call a journey of the soul, which I think is quite evocative way of referring to them. And the goal of using the community mapping project fitted with the steering group's aim to create a polyvocal sense of place through the Discovering Southwell project by actively seeking out and engaging as broad a spectrum of the community as we could, and allowing their voices to be heard. We can start to break the boundaries of hegemonic ideas, the ideas who had the right to be in the landscape, to interpret the heritage and who it belongs to and who belongs in it, and how they should think and feel about these things. Polyvocality is a powerful way to represent and reflect the diversity of individuals and communities that heritage organisations work within, by integrating many voices, individual perspectives and different ways of knowing, along with recognising the plurality of the processes of experience, cultural landscape. It can challenge the traditional univocal Westernist heritage discourse. Because of the founding principles of being community-led, Ecomuseum point the way forward as a model to amplify local voices, co-constructing meanings through bringing together authorised and alternative notions of heritage by actively pursuing polyvocality, and so increasing the potential of reflecting the broader community and so sustaining relevance. Throughout all the consultation processes, two main aspects have been important. Firstly, walk in the area, to secondly, meet people face to face and engage them in conversation, and encourage people to add their own voice to defining what matters to them and ultimately defining the Discovering Southwell project. To develop these further, I decided to try an innovative consultation process of walking Southwell to map the places that people told us meant something to them. Neen Simon uses an analogy of a dog for encouraging social interaction and connection around museum objects, citing the ability of dogs to act as one of the most powerful instigators of stranger socialization. So, applying this more literally, I actually co-opted my own dog, Albus, into the consultation team and walked Southwell and its surrounding area with him over a series of 7 walks. My hope was that it would act as a social icebreaker and prompt conversations with people I met. He's a bit of an odd-looking dog and very friendly, and he usually gets lots of attention and gets comments without even wearing the bespoke I'm Discovering Southwell tabard that I made him, that he wore during the walks. I hoped his presence would bring an element of fun and humour to the project and would be a good hook for our social media campaign on Twitter and Facebook. With no budget left for this follow-on project, I used free web applications, simple sites and Google My Maps, and the Discovering Southwell with Albus was this formed as the walking blog, and Discovering Southwell favourite places, favourite special sites for the map. The blog and social media feeds were used to raise awareness of the project, allowing people to follow what we were doing and encourage more people to join in. As an outsider to Southwell, walking and experiencing the landscape was a strong impulse on my part as a means to understand and connect with the people that I had met and the stories that they'd been telling me. During the consultation activities, people repeatedly told us how being able to walk everywhere around the town and the surrounding countryside and hamlets was of great importance to them and the quality of their life in Southwell. As such, Walking the Landscape project connected to what was an important aspect of community life. So, I've always believed that one of the best ways to get to know a place and to meet a variety of people is to walk. Walking the streets, lanes, footpaths and fields allows for a deeper understanding of the layers of history, natural and built, and the character itself to reveal itself at a human pace. Walking the landscape as an interpretive and a methodological practice highlights the primacy of the polycentrist character of human experience, meaning making and understanding of place. So a polymodal approach was taken, including phenomenological, semi-autobiographical, ethnographic and autoethnographic elements. I did 7 walks in Southwell and the surrounding area over July and August 2019. The walks lasted between 2 and 4.5 hours, the shortest taken in an area of just 1 kilometre square, and the longest only approximately 6.5 kilometres in length. My walks were determined by the places and stories that people had gifted to the project. Using these gifted sites, I walked the landscape to experience and map the places that make Southwell special to the people who live there. For some of the walks, I was accompanied by some of the contributors themselves, and we explored the sites that they have a connection to together. It was a privilege for me to be introduced up to, on an intimate level, the nature reserve that a local naturalist had helped protect for 15 years, or to accompany another resident visiting for the first time, the sites of his great-great-grandparents' life and journey from where they had first met as young farm workers to the place where they'd ended their days. A journey of less than a mile, but which spanned a lifetime. During the walks, I met other people who also shared what those places meant to them and offered other special sites too. Some of these extra sites and others were given by our social media campaign were added to the itineraries of subsequent walks, and all of these were added to the map as well. Photographs from my walk and others sent were added along with the community's own words to the digital online map. The nature of connection to these sites varied. Some were personal connections to their own lives or the lives of ancestors. Others simply places they enjoyed, places to contemplate, a beautiful view, a favourite place to buy sweets or walk their dog. Other sites had specific stories and histories attached to them that captured their imaginations. But all of these, no matter how humble a place or grand a site, were all viewed through a lens of their own personal perspectives and what they meant to them. In consequence, the beginnings of a polyvocal map of sites of connection would emerge and the community's own sense of place begin to be defined, where tangible and intangible heritage were interwoven in the context of a living, holistic landscape. To consciously avoid any bias, all sites were marked on the map with the same symbol, no matter whether they were major cultural touchstones decided on by the focus group, such as the obvious big heritage sites like the Minster, or more humble sites, such as a certain spot in a spinney loved because it was played in by multiple generations of the same family. Being undifferentiated in this way, it valorised all the places and interpretations equally. Making a community curated map can inform, inspire and embolden. Such cognitive mapping techniques allow for the plurality of meaning and knowing, disrupting authorised heritage discourse and so becoming expressions of community voice and power. When people can put their own mark or words onto a map, it allows them to claim or reclaim the space, and they become stakeholders. Allowing for many voices ensures that this becomes an exercise in openness and inclusivity. Through sharing the map and walks online, it hoped that it will stimulate a deeper understanding, reflection and exploration of the Southwell area, one that will prompt people to physically go out themselves and experience aspects of the area they hadn't previously explored, or to see in new parts they know. Similarly, virtual exploration is also facilitated, allowing broader access and interaction. The map is dynamic and continued to be added to and developed by Discovering Southwell and the community as it wishes, by sharing and creating deeper connections between place and people and between people and other people. It's hoped that it will help promote a dynamic sense of place and increase community cohesion and attachment. I believe the project did fulfil its aims to add to the foundation of a polyvocal sense of place on which Discovering Southwell can build through continual and varied engagement. At present, there's 111 markers on the map which can be added to as Discovering Southwell grows, using only, but importantly, all the places that were given to the project, and using their own words were given, even their own writing in some cases. I've sought to let the community's voices be heard, alone be heard. At some sites, such as the Minster, several different voices can be heard given their own personal interpretation of what makes that site special to them. Most voices are from those who live or work here now, but some are from people who have past connections to the town now live elsewhere, including internationally. The voices represent a polydimensional understanding of place and show different forms of attachment to it, including emotional, ontological, numinous, memories, ownership and stakeholder, sensorial and uplifting. The places represented ignore authorised heritage discourse, their muddy streams where childhood boots were lost, the site of a first love, a fairy door set in the foot of a giant ash tree beloved over 3 decades. Even where the sites are more obvious, interpretation confounds authorised heritage discourse. The workhouse is a dark memory of visiting a disabled uncle there in the 1950s. The Minster is the site of a wedding or an impression made on a visiting young chorister.
Victoria, can I just say that 2 minutes are left?
Okay, yeah. One contributor encapsulates beautifully the Ecomuseum sentiment as she links Southwell past with her present and on into its more distant future as she watches a young Bramley apple tree that she planted at a community event grow. It gives her a feeling of great pleasure, responsibility and protectiveness towards it, and inspires hope that it will become part of the proud Southwell Bramley heritage and maybe last 200 years like the original tree. Attachment and connection to place matters, and it's through these that place comes into being. Although still at the beginning of its project development, Discovering Southwell Community Consultation sought to embed from the outset a greater understanding and reflection of the importance of sense of place as a polydimensional process and its importance to individual and community identity. The mapping project has further advanced this goal, being founded on ideals of polydimensional experience and ways of knowing and polyvocality. So taking this research further, this autumn, as was mentioned earlier, I'm starting a funded PhD that will build on ideas of eco-museums and community connection to place, which I researched during my master's dissertation and placement with Discovering Southwell. I'm hoping to through examining the practice of the UK's 5 existing eco-museums, I'll explore the potential of the eco-museum in the UK, where the model isn't well known or widely used yet, as a mechanism and a process through which to promote community attachment to place through a more holistic ecological understanding of the landscape, and how this may be used as a basis for community-based solutions to achieving sustainability goals. It's hoped that this study will add a small part to the answer of what part heritage can play in tackling climate crisis. And that's the end. So thank you for listening. And there's the references.
Today I'm going to talk about something related to my PhD project. It's about the practice of ecomuseums in China, and to make it concrete, I chose the imperial tombs of Qing Dynasty in China and their associated communities as a case study. And there are 3 sections of my presentation. In the introduction, I will discuss some status of Chinese ecomuseum practice and to identify the problems and research questions, as well as my aim and objectives. And then in the case study, I will explain my case in detail. At last, I will discuss some of my research methods as well as some of my ideas and in the research process. Okay, let's start with this introduction. Okay, I will go through this part briefly because in the first panel, our keynote speaker has presented something about the ecomuseum practice in China. So here, I would like to explain some context here. We have the Chinese ecomuseum practice have been in practice for almost 30 years in country, and we have many developments, of course, but what we have to notice is that there are two contexts have not been changed all the time. The first of all, in the top-down social context, from the very beginning to the present, the practice of ecomuseum in China follows the approach of government lead. And the experts will give some, investigation and provide some suggestions. Then the community is just following them. And in this process, the government plays a decisive role. And besides, one of the aim of the initial practice in China of the ecomuseum was to reduce poverty in remote and backward areas of the country. Although ecomuseums have been constructed in economically developed areas later, the primary goals is to expand regional economy and improve the residents' lives. So, there's still some economic driving force there. So in these two contexts, there are some challenges actually exist in the practice of Chinese ecomuseums. And here I would like to explain the third and fourth points here. Okay, the cultural consignment was proposed by Mr. Dong Haisu, the founder of Chinese ecomuseum practice, which means that the discovery, explanation, and development of a regional culture is not in the hands of local community, but by others. And he also stated that the community must turn from the cultural consignment to the cultural autonomy, so that makes the ecomuseum practice sustainable. But in fact, in the overall top-down context, there are still, many challenges to achieve a complete cultural autonomy of the community. And in the fourth point, I would like to see that we can see the first generation practice in China was replaced by the second generation very quickly. And also the second generation has been replaced by NG mode in third generation very quickly again. But the practices subsequently have almost always copied NG, because the success of this kind of large project that in line with the platform of national policy and development plan. However, here I would like to ask that, does it mean this is the end of Chinese ecomuseum practice, or is there any, new more possibilities for the diversity of the ecomuseum practice? In this case, I would like to raise a question like this. And in this question, I would like to explore the issues of communities' memory and identity, especially dying memory identity, which is really specifically addressed in Chinese ecomuseum practice, as well as to further improve the community participation in the existing context. Besides, to exploit the diversity of the ecomuseum in China, for example, integrating the idea and practice of ecomuseum with the existing heritage conservation and management. Therefore, I aim to suggest a practical framework or approach to answer the research question I raised. And to achieve this aim, I need an appropriate case study to support my research, in addition to investigate some background carefully. So my case study is about the imperial tombs of Qing Dynasty and the community of the tomb caretakers' descendants. And the funeral culture in ancient China has a very long and complicated history. So you have to very carefully and think a lot of things about it when you would like to choose a section from this long history. And the main reason for choosing this case is that the Qing dynasty is the latest dynasty for us. So that the whole imperial tombs are well prepared, well preserved, and the surrounding communities of tomb caretakers' descendants still existing. Besides, these tombs have been listed into the World Heritage List actually. And this is the distribution of the tombs, and my research will focus on these two, the Eastern and Western Qing tombs in Hebei province. Before ruling the whole country, the Qing regime originated from the northeast of China in this area. Hence, these tombs were constructed in today's Liaoning province, actually. But compared with these two tombs garden, these tombs are smaller and simpler. That is why I would like to choose some, relative complete and have the complete scale and the system project like these tombs. And these two projects, the Eastern and the Western Qing tombs, these two projects started after Qing ruling the whole country in Beijing. They were constructed throughout the whole Qing dynasty, and almost all of the key members of the imperial family were buried in there. And there are many great architectures to show the strict hierarchy and the traditional Chinese feng shui culture. Maybe some of you know this feng shui culture. Okay, for example, here in this picture, this is the tomb of Emperor Shunzhi in the Eastern Qing tombs. And you can see that a standard emperor's tomb from this front to back, okay, consists with 24 large and small buildings. If it is the first emperor's tomb in the tombs garden, there are 3 more other buildings in the front. Actually, this is the first one, so there were 3 more buildings in the very front. And compared with emperor's tomb, 5 buildings are missing from the standard empress tomb. Moreover, each single building in empress tomb is smaller than that in emperor's. And well, there are some tombs for concubines, but it's the simplest one. Okay, and actually, the formation of the group of tomb caretakers closely relates to the construction of imperial tombs. And people moved and resettled to the areas that around the tombs because the imperial family needed someone to look after and safeguard its tombs. And in the picture on the left-hand side, you can see the location of tombs like this, here, yeah, these tombs. And the dark areas surrounded the tombs in which is the settlements for the tomb caretakers. And in this picture, on the right-hand side, you can see that at present, the distribution of towns, these 2 yellow points, and villages, the distribution of towns and villages is almost the same as before. You can compare these 2 pictures. So actually, it means that the descendants of the tomb caretakers still living in these villages. And in the Western Qing tombs, the situation is similar. Although some new villages have been built, it is not hard to identify the original settlements according to the villages' names actually at present. And the identity of caretakers in history is complicated. which represents some positive signs such as novelty and glory, but sometimes some negative meanings like punishment and losing trust. But for most people, it is benefit to be a caretaker because it means getting a job with a steady income, which seems like today's civil servant. And they were placed in different departments to perform different duties, such as safeguard the whole garden and cleaning and repairing the buildings and space, and all providing services for the imperial sacrifice. And in late Qing, the population of this group, for example, in the Eastern Qing tombs was around 8,000. In short, they built their own space and identity there, and this identity also ran in the family all the time. However, because of the changes of social and political landscape, they lost the support from the government since 1924. And after the establishment of People's Republic of China, they became ordinary citizens, just like everyone else today. And nowadays, the imperial tombs attract many visitors every year as a World Heritage Site that under the management of the state. And these pictures are taken by me in my pilot field work last winter in the Eastern Qing tombs. And you can see that there are some buildings and space are open to the public, but there's still some, space outside closed and waiting for repairing. Okay. And for the descendants of the caretakers today, they actually lost the connection with the tombs. Also, because they don't have any duty to take care of the tombs anymore, because tombs is taken care and managed by the government, by the state, and they have no relationship with the tombs actually. Also, their living space have changed dramatically. Some old buildings, for example, in pictures, some old buildings that carry the memory and identity of the caretakers are almost demolished because of the, urbanization or something, development of the city. And if you now visit the Eastern Qing tombs, and you will find this exhibition, the pictures here, this exhibition, and its name is the Tomb Caretakers Family. But I have to say, it does not live up to its name. Neither the content nor the layout is satisfied, actually. But in fact, we can say that this community still carries some cultural factors and memories related to the World Heritage Site, and which should be, but not be included in a comprehensive interpretation and protection of the World Heritage Site. And in my investigation, I found that these existing memories are very fragile. And if we continue to ignore them, they will disappear soon. So the next part is about what should I do actually. Okay, and in this research, I conduct the field work in Beijing and Hebei province, actually the pilot field work. And I adopt these methods in my field work. And I would like to say something about interviews because it's quite important in my research, because I have to interview communities to understand and document their memories and stories, as well as I have to know their views on preserving and reshaping their memories and identities. Do they really want to do this, and why yes and why no? And I also have to talk to the scholars and officials, for example, Professor Pan, and to figure out the difficulties or opportunities or challenges to adopting the idea of eco-museum to connect the community with the existing heritage. So I'm so glad that
Queenie, you've got 2 minutes left.
Oh, okay, thanks. And here I would like to say something about this key informant because he's very important and helped me a lot, and I will talk about him later. And I also found some challenges here in my pilot field work, but this challenge will get me to reflect and revise my research plan all the time. And I would like to recommend some cases because I think they impaired me a lot actually. For example, the cases here, there is a constructive long-term pre-community educational framework, which might be an approach that I can adopt, and also there's some way to use the ordinary small objects to reshape the community's memory, especially in the demolished space. And of course, we cannot forget the power of the online platform for the community to participate in the project. This is what I would like to say is, there are many challenges, of course, but I still can see some hope from the whole research process until now. For example, I saw, according to my long-term observation about my key informant, and he is an expert on the tools, on the imperial tools, and as well as he's descendant of the tomb caretakers. And I found that he has more than 1.5 million of followers in his social network platform, and he updates his studies on about the tombs, including history, architecture, stories, and everything, with references almost every day. And in this process, he interacts with people and promote the knowledge to the public, as well as to educate the public to protect heritage. And on the other hand, his online platform seems like a small database actually, because sometimes when I need some resources, I will go there, and at least he will tell me and where can I get the original archives or maps. It's very helpful. But actually, what I think is what he's doing is a kind of community participated in protecting heritage, and it might be a great start point for a project. And besides, there are already some foundations of tourism and heritage conservation in this site, and some facilities such as the exhibition hall just mentioned, which can be reconstructed. And anyway, this study is looking for a place to fit in, so that to adopt the holistic and dynamic idea of eco-museums to help communities restoring its memory and identity in order to reconnect the community and the heritage. On the other hand, it's beneficial to the holistic protection and interpretation of the World Heritage Site. And this research is important. Yes, my research is important because it's not only about trying to increase the diversity of eco-museum practice in China, but also to fill some gap there of narrating some disappearing stories of a group. And actually, those stories should be a part of our heritage. Okay, this is the references. And thank you very much.
Okay, so I represent the Association for the Protection of Cultural Heritage, and I today will be talking about a project we completed in February 2020. It was a 3-year project, and we partnered with Edinburgh World Heritage as an NGO based in Istanbul, Turkey. But this project, which I'm going to talk about, wasn't in Istanbul. It was in Southeast Turkey, in a city very close to the Syrian border called Mardin, and you can now see Mardin here, sorry. Yeah, that's better. And this, in the city, we restored a historical house, which we called Tamir Evi, and translates into repair house. And I will start with showing this photo of our building. And it was, you can see it's a masonry building, which is a couple of 100 years old. And we focused on energy efficiency and environmental sustainability in this project, among other subjects. And why did we do this? Because, of course, we're seeing tangible signs of climate crisis on an epic scale. And we wanted to draw attention to the fact that most of our built environment is already built, And so the question is, do we replace buildings that are not energy efficient? Can we retrofit? And what will be the cost of demolition? So most importantly, demolishing a structure and building a new one requires such a big amount of energy, but adapting historic or existing structures firstly conserves energy and also protects the uniqueness and the memories and history embedded in this building. So what we did within this building was that we took all these into consideration. And for example, things like the building techniques here, they all predate powered heating, cooling, and electrical lighting. So they contain a lot of the passive technologies that today most modern buildings lack. And so these buildings are really much more sustainable to renovate and to be historical energy efficient buildings than to build new structures instead. So this building, Tamireve, like a lot of historical structures, predated the bigger sources of energy, such as electricity. So in a way, it's really instinctively built in a way that conserves energy. And what we did was we restored this building and turned it into a museum, so in an energy efficient way. So it really generates its own power in a city which has a lot of power cuts and also gets water only twice a week. And this is a designated historical city, so it will never ever even get natural gas. So it has to find a way to heat itself energy efficiently. So we worked with, of course, the Sustainable Development Goal 11. And really, to quote Lubeck, we can't build our way out of the global warming crisis. We have to conserve our way out. We have to work with what we have and use what we have wiser than we have in the past. And we go with the premise that the greenest building is the one that's already built. Because of course there are two types of energy. The first is embodied energy, which is all the energy that goes into the erection of a building, including mining the stones in this case, manufacturing things, transporting construction materials, as well as transporting labor, of course. And then there's the operational energy, which is like electricity for lighting appliances, etc. And if you construct a new building or demolish the one that exists, regardless of it being historical or not, you waste this embodied energy. And you will spend more energy, of course, for making the new one. So reusing a historic building is really the ultimate form of recycling. And successful energy efficient historic building renovation, like the one we did, can decrease both operational costs without adding any extra costs as would be in a new build. So I'll just show you this was where our building was within this historic city, which is on a slope, which you saw in the first photo. And what is important is that when you're restoring a historic building, you shouldn't sacrifice significant attributes of a historic building just to make it energy efficient. And some people say it's not compatible to make a building energy efficient and also conserve it, but there are many examples in the world, especially in the West and in the UK. And working with a UK partner, we were able to do this in Turkey. And so this is the first and so far only energy efficient historic building in Turkey. And what we did was we first started with some questionnaires with the people who lived there. And you can see these red buildings are the houses where these people we talked to in the questionnaire live in. And we asked them a lot of questions about their energy consumption and generally how happy they are with, living in their houses. And we generated these graphics as a result of the questionnaires. We found their problems in terms of the energy in their houses. And so we worked with their problems, and we organized also trainings, which I will come to later, because there are some things you can do when you're restoring a building as an architect or engineer. And there are also some things which you can do as a historical homeowner for example, when preparing to the winter. So this is our building over here at the bottom left. And so we, as I said, we worked through this energy efficient restoration of a stone house as a model, and we wanted it to be an example. And so this solar system is a good example to show the dilemma between conserving the unique characteristics of a historic building and fitting it to modern energy efficient requirements. So this city, which you see, Mardin, is one of the most sustainable cities in Turkey for solar energy systems with regard to the average solar radiation and duration of sunshine it gets throughout the year. And one other thing is that you can see that the roofs are always flat in Mardin. And this is a very characteristic part of its silhouette. So in order to utilize solar energy, you put photovoltaic panels on the roof, which convert solar energy into heating or cooling. And our concern, of course, were that these panels should not be visible from the street level and do any harm to its historic silhouette. So we talked to, we had discussions with the conservation board, with the mechanical engineers, and we determined that if we place the panels at just a 10-degree angle, they will not be seen from the street, and also they will be just as effective as, you know, if they were upright. So this is an example of one of the compromises and discussions you need to have when you're doing such a project, which will also be an example as it is now, because it's a museum open to the public. So we had these stakeholder meetings. So at every point we were working with the public there. And this is just showing what we did. So the PV panels, and we used heat pump. In this case, we used an air-sourced one. We used the canopy, which provides shade. We thought of putting this vegetation, but then decided not to because the roots would damage the historic building. And so this is installation of the PV panels, and this is the system shown in the exhibition also. And one thing that is also exceptional is we got an energy performance certificate at the end of the restoration and before, and you can see that it was a B and C class, and now it's A class, both in terms of performance and emission. And this is again something which is the first in Turkey. And I said, Tamire, we wanted it to be a model, and in the exhibition when you go, you also can look at the story of this too. So we trained university students throughout the conservation, and they worked with carpenters and stonemasons who we had trained again in the building beforehand. And these students weren't necessarily architecture students. They were sometimes from sociology, history, because as you all know, conservation is a multidisciplinary field. We also held a workshop on energy efficiency, because you know, you restore one singular building, which is quite expensive and takes a long time, but then you have to take steps in other fields, especially in building awareness and capacity. So we worked with training a diverse group of people, as in students and masons and carpenters, which are, of course, our craftsmen and future engineers and architects. But also we worked with the public and private sector, who really should be trained on the importance of environmental sustainability and energy efficiency in these historic structures. And it took a while to have them break out of their professional comfort zone in order to understand what we were talking about in terms of preserving a building and making it this high-tech energy efficient building. So we had a 2-day workshop with these professionals, architects, engineers. And then at the end of this workshop, we made this declaration. It's a manifesto on integrating energy efficiency principles to historic buildings, which we shared with all these practices around Turkey. And we also opened it to the general public, and our construction site was unlike all construction sites in Turkey, which are always closed during the restoration. It was always open. You would just need to call the number on the poster just in front of the sites, or just send an email to reserve a slot, and then our architects and masons would take you around. And we had groups of adults going around, but also, as you can see, we had a lot of lovely, very young participants going around our sites. And this generated a lot of attention from the media. They were really interested that, you know, the stonemasons were really knowledgeable about the restoration. And you can see here again.
Can I just give a notice if there is 2 minutes left?
Yes, sure. And now I'm just going to leave you with some before-after photos. And this is a museum right now, which tells you about the process we went through. And so this is before and after. And it shows all the processes we went through, both in the training and in developing, you know, an ecologically friendly, environmentally conscious, and energy efficient historic building. So this is how it is now. And then the upper story, this is the lower story on the left, and the upper story is an artist residency where you can go and apply to be an artist and, you know, do something hopefully related to history and ecology there. I would also like to show you this website, which we have, which shows, for example, the trainings. As I said, we trained carpenters, and these all include the training we did. And also Tamirebe, if you press on this, it tells about the structure, and it also has information about the energy efficiency measures as well as the conservation we did. So I'd like to leave you with this.
Kalpuragan village is one of those fascinating villages in Iran. It's located in Sistan and Baluchistan province in the southeast of Iran. Kalpuragan pottery technique is the making of pottery without using a pottery wheel, and all the pottery with primitive methods made by Baluch women. The abstract rules and motifs inspired are entirely geometric lines of that area. The warm harmony between the reddish shade of potteries and the brown themes make these crafts more eye-catching. This village is in the middle of the desert, and it was isolated from outside world for many centuries. So the tradition of pottery making between women of the village existed until now. These potteries, with their unusual patterns, transmitted to the next generation without any change. Local artists have still kept a powerful yet a straightforward method of creating these pieces of art. Before the revolution, when the Queen of Iran traveled there, she found out this tradition. It is significant to be saved. So they provided resources to build a workshop and bought all potteries they made when there was no demand for these objects. The elders of the village remembered the travel of Queen to the village, and of course her help changed the situation. A Finnish ceramist, Elina Sorainen, traveled there before the Islamic Revolution and started to do a research on the village. She invited to, before the revolution, she invited to teach ceramic art at Tehran University. During the Islamic Revolution, she returned to Finland, but she couldn't forget about Kalpuragan village. So for her PhD thesis, she came back to Iran. Her thesis name was A Wave, a Chain, and a Date Grove, living museum protecting the ceramics traditions of women potters in an Iranian village. It is a scientific research work, and it was published for the first time in Finnish language by the Helsinki University of Art and Design. Now, in 2006, the name of the university changed to Aalto University. In 2019, it was translated into Farsi language by me, with a preface written by Mrs. Tia Norvanto. The method of research is an action-oriented case study which conducted by using the model of living museum, which Elina Sorainen had researched in Onta village, located in Japan, and they have a pottery tradition, strong pottery tradition. Elina Sorainen made 9 field trips to Kalprogan village from 1977 to 2003 altogether. This thesis validity based on material collected during these 9 field trips. Material included objects, photographs, video films, and written notes. The research included close description of women potters of Kalprogan village, their work and working methods, and their teachers' memories. The usage of their pottery and the symbolism of the ornaments were clarified in direct discussion with the potters. Working methods and ceramic pieces and the surroundings and lifestyle of potters community were photographed and recorded on video and audio phones. The primary aim of the research is to understand and interpret the work of a potters community in Kalprogan village, to show the future of the pottery making in a modern world, where mass production and urbanization could see as threats for this ancient, local, and unique tradition. Tradition of pottery making had preserved unchanged despite the changes in Iranian society and politics, especially Islamic Revolution and after that Iran-Iraq War. Elina Sorainen wrote that the pottery making was like a universal language that all the potters could understand, never mind the time and the place. But according to her and the tradition, under the pressure of extinction because of ignorance and indifference. As we know, many times the work of history-oriented scientists, historians, or anthropologists, ethnologists, folklorists is concentrated into making research and documentary about the past, ways of living of the people, beliefs, folk tales, etc., etc. However, Elina Sorainen went far beyond this approach. Her method was an action-oriented case study with her long-lasting, very devoted and skillful research work. She became a key figure in helping the potters of Kalprogan village to revitalize their old tradition and to empower the local women. Being a very modest woman, Elina Sorainen saw herself only as a moderator and link person between the potters and local authorities in revitalizing the ancient pottery making in the Kalprogan village. Elina Sorainen's work in Iran shows us that scientific and cultural activities and exchanges give us a general perspective on the past, present, and the future. Culture can build bridges between nations and people and increase understanding of others and ourselves. During her field trips to Kalprogan village, Elina Sorainen must have felt a sense of togetherness and shared knowledge with women potters of Kalprogan village, despite language, nationality, religion, and ethnic background. Elina Sorainen's in-depth expertise and affection to Iranian culture and the people, and especially to Kalprogan women, is awe-inspiring and touching. And what with the actual and concrete results of Elina Sorainen research work in Kalprogan village, we should say there were many significant and impressive results. For example, work and retirement conditions of potters improved, new potters were given training, new employment possibility for the villages created, which means that the whole village gained for the better terms of the potters. The Cultural Heritage Organization of Iran took the potters as a community, as a part of its organizational scheme. And the community was given the Persian name, we call it Museye Zende, and we can translate it to Living Museum. And 3 master potters started receiving wages from the organization. These 3 potters began training and choosing their daughters-in-laws, and granddaughters for the apprenticeship. 22 girls and young women in all, and positive results were seen already after half a year of training. Eventually, the potters claimed total independence and formed a ceramic cooperative of their own.
Your 2 minutes are left, please.
Okay. The reason for me to translate this book was my friendship with Elina, and she was my curator for my 2 photo exhibitions in Finland. After she passed away, I wanted to show my respect to her and translated the book to Farsi. I couldn't do it without the help of my friends and embassy of Finland in Tehran. After I translated the book into Farsi, I had to obtain permit from the Ministry of Culture and Islamic Guidance to publish it. So I sent the book to them. After months, they said I should go to see a person, and after that, he said I should erase names of king and the queen from the book. In fact, after the Islamic Revolution, regime tried to erase people's memories. They changed the name of streets, monuments, and even history. Some famous streets like Lalezar Street abandoned to destroy, and lots of cinemas and salons closed. In Kalprogan, it was like that. After the revolution, many people in power tried to forget about the village, and Elina helped the villagers to register the community on the UNESCO list. The area managers wanted to show the world they are who resorted the pottery culture and asked for their share from their profit. After the book published, it ignored by Iran Ministry of Cultural Heritage, and for the book launch, nobody from the Ministry of Cultural Heritage didn't show up. The book launched back the embassy by the Embassy of Finland in Iran. The Embassy of Finland in Iran bought some copies of the book and gave it to people, to Iranian artists who live abroad, showed and gave regards of the Queen in exile to me for the book. And my found of Kalprogan showed the government did not succeed in erasing villagers' memory, but for many years they could hide information from outside the village. Thank you.
The presentation is divided into 3 parts. The first part is introduction of Natalie Handel. The second part talks about identity politics and shared identity and its relation to Arab-Israeli conflict. And the third part presents highlights from the selected poems. When we go to Natalie Handel, we introduce her, I quote, "I am Palestinian and permanent transience has been my reality. I cannot escape the trauma of losing my homeland and all that it represents for me, for the history of my people. So of course that will always transpire in my work. I live in the United States and cannot escape the experience of being held between the crack of a half-open door. On one side, the view of high rises. On the other side, the view of disappearing olive trees." This is how Natalie Handel presents herself, a Palestinian, though she's known as a French-American poet, but she insists on introducing herself to the people as a Palestinian. In this slide, we get to know some more information about Natalie Handel as a playwright, producer, and director, and we get to know some of the awards she got. This slide talks about her work, okay, and more information can be accessed on Poetry Foundation. We come to the main purpose of this paper. This paper investigates Handel's re-imaging of Palestine as the promised land. Such a re-imaging is crystallized through two perspectives, identity politics and shared identity. Handel reconstructs an image of Palestine from family memories, from her travels to Palestine, and we see that the selected poems take the names of cities in Palestine, like Ephrata, Bethlehem, Regret and Jalili, Jenin, Gaza City, Haifa, Baladna, and the last poem, America, is Handel's Listen to the World, as we'll see now. Handel recalls an image of, of home. This image is a geometrical image through reconstructing an image of old Palestine. However, a geopolitical image of home is put in juxtaposition in order to highlight her journey for obtaining global identity. So I argue that the two perspectives, there is the identity politics and shared identity, intertwined in Handel's poems due to her life and travels, provide a version of complete portrait of Palestine as Handel sees it. When we come to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, much has been said and much have been, many books have been published about Palestine as a free land. But what I want to highlight here is that Israeli settlements have been spreading illegally in Palestinian lands, which has worsened matters, which has effaced the identity of old Palestine. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict will not stop unless the world recognizes the pre-1947 Palestine as an Arab state, which is a chimeric dream, of course, because the people, gave a cold shoulder to all what has been going on Palestine, to all Israeli crimes that has been committed against Palestinian people. But Handel's poems get the reader involved in this conflict so that he has to pass a judgment. The reader who reads all these poems about the cities, about the memories, about the old Palestine and how this old Palestine image has gradually, changed into a geopolitical one, okay, needs some kind of involvement from the reader regardless nationality, religion, or ethnic background. Here I present what I mean by identity politics and how it is related to the Arab-Israeli conflict. In this case of Arab-Israeli conflict, identity politics makes collective identities stagnant, contributes to their politicization and radicalization, and triggers political protest. That's why it should be weakened in order to not to have, a solid front by Palestinians or Arabs that can, face or struggle against what Israel has been doing there. The collective identity the Palestinians take is the focus of the struggle for power. That's why it is politicized. On the other hand, in constructing Israeli national identity, it is observed that religion and politics are deeply intertwined and constitutive of each other. So it's not a national identity, it's some kind of identity politics. Moreover, they have been complicit in the legitimization of exclusionary politics towards the Arab population of Israel and Palestine. So it's not some kind of national identity, and that's all. No, it is some kind of identity politics that, this highlights a special group. This group is based on religion as well as politics. We come to take some idea about global identity. Palestinian Arabs share an identity that is collective identity. And I use the term collective identity to refer to an identity shared by a group or category. Collective identity becomes politically relevant when people who share a specific identity take part in political action on behalf of that collective identity. There was a program led by US. This program was some kind of educational program that brought some groups of Palestinians, Israeli Palestinians or Palestinian Israelis and Israelis together in order to just, have some kind of common understanding and in order to reach the idea of coexistence, the result was that this program failed. Not only that this program failed, but it resulted in identity accentuation, suggesting increased likelihood and intensity of conflict. So a lot of efforts should be exerted in order to reach this kind of coexistence and modus vivendi. The introduction of indigenousness of minorities not only differentiates between Israeli Jews and Jews coming from the diaspora, but it leads to the emergence of the Palestinians in Israel as a third people, which is a real catastrophe. So not only the identity of Palestine or all Palestine has gradually been erased, but it has drastically been changed into just invaders, intruders, third people. On the other hand, multiple identities may not result in an inward struggle so much as in a tendency for accepting the coexistence with the other. An example of this is Handel's poems and works. Handel aspires for a global identity and modus vivendi in all her works. In the image in front of us, we see that the geomental image of Palestine, free Palestine, with all the traditions and customs and all the memories of all Palestinians, this geomental image has gradually been changed, passing by 1947 to 1967 till we reach 2020 with Trump's projected plan, where we find that historic Palestine is just 15%. Now Palestine is geopoliticized. It's not the real Palestine, and this is, the real danger. And this is what Handel tries to struggle against through her poetry. She tries to reconstruct an image of old Palestine through collecting memories and through getting her readers, though Palestinian or not, into involvement in such kind of reconstructing memories. In this table, we find the selected poems, and these selected poems are put in a way that represents either identity politics or shared or global identity. We find Pratha, that represents geomental image, reconstructing memories. Then Beit Lahem, we find attempts at definition of the geopolitical identity of the place. Okay. Then regrets in Jalili, recollecting memories, and we come to Jenin. We find that a call for peaceful coexistence or for a shared identity is evident in this poem. In Gaza City, Handel is trying to keep the geomental image and the old Palestine vivid. In Haifa, there are attempts at re-imaging Palestine. In Baladna, we find that Handel is swinging between, global identity and past identity. Then we reach the last poem that is titled America, and in this poem we find attempts at having identity politics in juxtaposition to global identity. So now we will have a look at spotlights from the poems. The first poem is
Yes, sir, can I just say 4 minutes are left?
4 minutes, okay. Okay, in this poem, as we see that Handel is addressing the poem itself. I quote, "Poem dressed in olive branches and cracked happiness, surrounded by seasons of sleepless nights, staring at the dusty walls of cities we have lost. Handel brings life to her memories and revives the geomental image of Pratha by using poetic devices. In Beit Lahem, okay, things are blurred here. Nothing is, clear. And she asked all people about all memories, but no one answered her. At Jenin, okay, in Jenin, it is night without a blanket, as you see that there is no security. And here, the speaker calls for coexistence, for a shared identity. I quote, "All I want is a row of olive trees, a field of toilets to forget." Next slide. "The maze of intestines, the dried corners of a soldier's mouth. All I want is for the small black-eyed child to stop wondering. When the fever will stop, the noise will stop. All I want is a loaf of bread, water, help for the stranger's torn arm." Then we move to, next slide, to Gaza City. okay, and find attempts at re-imaging old Palestine through talking about Deb Kennedy's No More. Next slide, please, for the sake of time. Then we move to Haifa, okay, and find attempts at effacement of Palestinian identity haven't stopped. I quote, "The lone trees keep disappearing, and the weather keeps changing, and we keep aging. Things keep changing, and the old Palestine, keeps changing." Next slide, please. We come to Baladna, and in Baladna, the speaker is torn between the past and the present. I quote, "We are who we are, and home is home. To keep the season dreaming, to remind us of ahwa, za'atar, khubuz, kak, the common things. I'm no longer sure what I see. We are who we are. Are we who we are?" No, she's confused here, as you see. Next slide, please. Now we come to America, the last point, and in America, there are a lot to be said, but for the sake of time, okay, please come to the next slide. We come to the lesson. The lesson Handel wants to just give to the whole world. The lesson the speaker tries to teach the world is clear. I quote, "She wonders why we are obsessed with difference, our need to change the other." The last line stressed the fact that identity search is a never-ending process. I quote, "My voice still breaking into tiny pieces when I introduce myself to someone new and imagine I have found my way home." The last point, reimaging Palestine in selected poems of the lives of Rain has been realized through two perspectives, identity politics and global identity, which are related to the geomental and geopolitical images of Palestine respectively. Discussion of the above-mentioned poems that bear the names of cities have proved that Handel has succeeded in having a home in poetry. Handel realizes that she's to live with the idea of loss of home and permanent transience. Her poems prove the memories of home are deeply rooted in her, despite the fact that she's lived in different places. A brief discussion of Palestinian-Israeli conflict shows how identity politics has been a result of this struggle and justifies Handel's aspiration for global identity and modus vivendi. Handel's cultural references have opened new venues to remapping literature and revisioning old masters' works from a politicized perspective. Thank you very much for listening to me.